Okay. Good morning to you all. We meet once again for the second MPhil program interaction on Hazar Churashir, which is included in course number 121, Gender Studies, unit number 2. The other day, we had discussed about the political, historical background of the novel, about the author, and we had ended there with the assurance that all of us would be fit, would be safe, and would return after a week. And I think our confidence and assurance has worked, so we are all back for a discussion on the text of the novel itself. Now, unfortunately, because I could not lay my hands on the English version, which I have, it is back in Midnapore, I have resorted to the internet, thankfully, where the Bangla version of Hazar Churashir is available. And the one fundamental basis on which I could depend was the fact that the text has been included in our syllabus not as mother of 1084 but as Hazar Churashir. There are two things regarding this. Number one, that it is not mother of 1084 because that of becomes a kind of difficulty and a hindrance to an understanding of the essential element in the novel, which is better communicated by the Bangla title Hazar Churashir Ma. Kono barti kotha nei, it is 1084 and mother. And we will come to that in the course of our discussion today. So, now let us move on to the novel itself. Since this novel has been included in that component called Gender Studies in your MPhil program, therefore, it would be interesting to see what we understand by gender studies. What do we mean by gender studies? It implies an interdisciplinary academic field devoted to analyzing gender identity and gendered representation. Therefore, it includes women's studies, men's studies, queer studies, and sometimes the study of sexuality inevitably enters the field, because the moment we speak of gender, then sexuality is one of the elements that form a fundamental basis of gender studies. So that will also be there. A very significant comment has been made by Simone de Beauvoir when she said that one is not born a woman, one becomes one, in her very famous text, The Second Sex. Although, excuse me, there are other theorists opining against this view subsequently, it may be safely said that as far as the attitude of the members of Sujata's family and the milieu to which she belonged in general towards her are concerned, this idea that one is not born a woman, one becomes one, is very, very apt in her case. And we will see how she had become a woman and how she gets out of that casing into which she was put, a beautiful casing like an ornament box, and she emerges from that casing and emerges as a human being. When we look at Hazar Churashir from the perspective of gender studies, it would be useful to keep the historical period in mind, something about which we have discussed in detail in our last interaction, since it plays a very strong part in our understanding of Sujata, the protagonist. Now, in a conversation with Rajiv Mehrotra for Doordarshan, which is available in YouTube, Mahashweta Devi said, and I quote from what she said, "I believe in resistance. I believe in protest. I believe in struggle. So you will see how this is so applicable to the text that we are going to look at today. She also points out that she uses savage black humor in her creative writing. And this savage black humor is very important because in this novel too we find that there is the subterranean savage black humor which is very active in the course of the unraveling of the narrative. She says that she uses this savage black humor because she wants to tear the society. And when she says this, she makes a gesture with her hands as if she wants to tear the society apart. She points out, my approach to literature is forensic as well. And when Mr. Mehrotra asks her what she means by forensic, she explains, I am very analytical, very ruthless, very cruel, very objective. Again, this method of the author is applicable to Hazar Churashir Ma as well. And she says that she believes in the continuity of life. She believes that there can be no neat ending. And so her stories don't have a neat ending. They are open-ended, so to say, indicating towards this continuity and possibilities for further development. The edition of the text that I shall refer to is the original Bengali one, and I have referred to the e-text of this version downloaded from archive.org. Now, very quickly, because we are going to deal with the perspective of gender studies regarding this novel and not anything else, so let us take a look at the women in the novel. You will find that there are three important women: Sujata Chatterjee, the protagonist, Shomu's mother, and Nandini, who is Broti's girlfriend. And Shomu was another young man in the revolutionary activity with which Broti was engaged. Besides these three women characters, we have Sujata's mother-in-law, we have Bini Chatterjee, Sujata's elder son, Jyoti's wife, we have Hem, Sujata's maid, whose salary is given by Sujata, which she points out to her daughter when she misbehaves with him. This is reported by him. And she tells her daughter that I will not accept this. When the daughter says, oh, so him has told you that I have said certain things to her. And Sujata, because she is incapable of and not in the habit of telling lies, she says, yes, him has reported to me. And you will behave properly with her. If you can't do that, at least you will not misbehave with her. I will not allow that. It shows that Sujata has gradually begun to emerge as an assertive lady towards the latter part of the novel. Nipa is Sujata's elder daughter who is married and who has a daughter. There is Tuli, Sujata's younger daughter, whose engagement is going to take place on that day. By the way, this novel is somewhat like James Joyce's Ulysses. It spans one day and it is divided into 4 chapters or sections: morning, afternoon, evening, and in the English version, because I haven't been able to find a better term, I have said twilight, but it is actually Shondhabela. Shondhabela, we know, is the time when social gatherings take place. So the engagement will also take place in the Shondhabela, which is just after evening and before night, deep down into the night. Apart from Shomu's mother, in Shomu's household, there is Shomu's sister. In Nandini's house, we don't meet anybody because she is living with a relation, as she says. And there are some other women who come during the Shondha evening party, which is the Tuli's engagement party with Tony Kapadia. There we find Mrs. Kapadia, Tony's mother, Nargis Kapadia, Tony's sister, and Mrs. Molly Mitro. Now, if we talk about the women, then we'll also have to take a quick look at the men in the novel, and we see they are quite a number of them. There is, of course, Sujata's husband, Dibbonath Chatterjee. There is Jyoti Chatterjee, her elder son. There is Broti Chatterjee, who is now dead body number 1084, Sujata's younger son. Shumon Chatterjee, Jyoti's son. Amit Ganguly, Nipa's husband. Bolai Dotto, Amit's cousin, his Pistuto Bhai, with whom Nipa has a very open physical relationship. And because Bolai is very powerful in society, Amit prefers not to poke his nose into that extramarital affair. He rather seems to encourage it. You have Bhikon, the peon in the bank, who is very caring about Sujata. There is Nathu, who is mentioned only once, who has been reported by him as having gone to the neighbor's home to get some ice for the evening party because their own fridge is not working. There are those four young men who, like Proti, are already dead. Shomu, Bijit, Laltu, and Partho, who are mentioned and whose mothers, interestingly, are referred to in the conversation between Shomu's mother and Sujata. We have Onindo, Proti's college friend, who had taken his picture, the picture which Sujata hands over to Nandini, and Nandini identifies it as the one which Onindo had taken. Very ironic. So there you have savage black humor, that the mother is handing over a picture of the son to the girlfriend as a memoir, and the picture has been taken by that man who was responsible for his death. You have Ronu Mitro, who is Jishu Mitro and Molly Mitro's son, who was Broti's school friend and with whom Broti had no connection after they left school. And yet, when Broti tells his mother that I shall be spending the night with Ronu, it is obvious that he was lying to his mother because he did not want her to be disturbed about him. You have Dhiman Roy, who is a self-seeking poet, to whom Nandini refers in her conversation with Sujata, and who, again, ironically, or because of Mosheta Devi's savage black humor, turns up in that party. There is yet another person who arrives and leaves because that person does not have the courage, in spite of his position, his quote-unquote dignity, his protection, security personnel. He cannot come to the party. He remains in his car where Sujata goes to meet him out of a sense of courtesy. He is Saroj Pal, the young man who was the pride of the government and the pride of many people who depended on him so that he could use the state machinery to curb the movement in which Broti was engaged. And in the process of curbing that movement, he had also unleashed plenty of unspeakable terror. So Saroj Pal is Tony Kapadia's friend. Now from this circle, therefore, you can understand the kind of people with whom Sujata's family would do ota bosha, would sit up, sit down, stand up, dance, interact, have different interactions, engagements, which would help them to advance themselves in society towards a more complacent, more financially stable, more affluent, more luxurious lifestyle. So in this nexus, you have Dibbonath, you have Jyoti, you have Amit, Bolai, Tony, Jishu Mitro, Dhiman Roy, and Saroj Pal. Different people who represent the different aspects of the then society, who wanted to pretend that all was well as young men like Broti were being eliminated one by one. This is brought out in the course of the novel, which is like a journey which Sujata undertakes. Very quickly, some of the occupations of the persons in the novel. Sujata is a banker. She is a section in charge. She is not an officer. There is Dibbonath, who is a chartered accountant, who is not a good, honest chartered accountant because it is his tendency to always keep sneaking into other chartered accountants' firms and take away their clients for his own firm. And it is said that when he dies, nobody will repent. He is such a ruthless and wicked man. So he is all that Sujata is not. And yet they are married and they have 4 children. Uh, so it is clear that Sujata's marriage to Diponath had been engineered by her father against uh, her seeking her opinion regarding that matter. And she, because of the way in which she was brought up, accepted whatever her family decided for her, and thus her marriage with Diponath. After she gets married to him, it is clear from the course of the narrative that her mother in law was very fond of her son and never saw anything wrong that her son did. And she was always a very dominating woman as far as Sujata was concerned. So, if you look at this from the gender studies perspective, it is that same old story where the Shashuri is very oppressive, and if there is any kind of Bodhu Nirjaton, then of course the Shashuri seems to take a very leading role in that kind of a relationship. And the children are bought in a gap of 2 years, and Jyoti and Nipa's birth are in a gap of 6 years, because Sujata tells us in the course of the novel that she had done her level best to avoid Diponath's advances towards her so that she would get pregnant again. But finally, she fell a victim to his advances and she got pregnant. She did not want this child. She hated this child. But during the 9 months of pregnancy, somehow towards the end, she felt that it was a responsibility and duty towards this baby who was coming to the world. And thus Jyoti was born. And because the older 3 children were in the image of their father and their Takuma, and they did not show much respect towards Sujata, which again has a very interesting gender studies perspective. Because if Jyoti does not behave properly with his mother, that is understood. But when the 2 daughters are not behaving properly with the mother, it shows how even women are used against other women by power structures in which there are other men and women who are powerful and who employ their power positions in trying to corner or to exploit another woman. So it is not a male female binary that is active in a typical upper middle class, nearly elite Bengali society, but it is very complex. In spite of Sujata's education in Loreto education system, you find that when it comes to the question of her family life, she is just another exploited Indian woman. This exploitation is something which Broti, being very sensitive, notices right from his infancy, and as he grows up, he grows to resent it, he grows to hate it, and after his death, it is from Nandini that Sujata gets to know that he had even protested against his father's extramarital affair with a number of women, of whom the latest was the typist for whom he had also arranged an accommodation. And interestingly, about this relationship between Diponath and the typist, it was the youngest daughter who knew everything. She knew everything, and yet she protected her father. She helped him as if it was something which was very prestigious for a man to have an extramarital affair. That is why time and again Mahashweta Devi makes Sujata think, feel, and she thinks loudly that this young daughter is in the image of her grandmother, her Takuma. And of course, you have Jyoti's parents-in-law who live abroad. Nipa's husband, Amit Ganguly, is a customs officer. Tony Kapadia has an agency for exporting Indian handicrafts. Um, and of course, uh, you have uh, uh, um, you have Somu's sister, who is engaged in offering tuitions as a way of earning some money for the family. And even there, her mother points out that many people are unwilling to invite a girl whose brother has been designated as a revolutionary and who has been killed in that brutal manner, as if he has done something wrong. He is the worst kind of criminal, so that they don't want her to come in to teach their children. So getting tuitions is also very difficult for Shomu's sister. Now then, Sujata is not compared and contrasted to Shomu's mother and Nandini in the novel, who are two other women who have been affected and shattered by the police atrocities extended to suspected Naxalites, as well as other political party members, making it a point to uh, kill them in mob violence in a very brutal way, as if expressing a kind of nasty entertainment, a nasty pleasure in gradually beating up, shooting, stabbing these young men to death. It is a kind of anger, wrath. It is a kind of intense hatred that this section tries to show to those young men who wanted to bring about a positive change to society. But in trying to bring about that change, they were actually working against the interests of two very distinct agencies. One was the government agency. Remember, this is nearly 25 years after independence, and things had begun to come out as very transparent and clear as to which direction in which the country was heading. After independence, the ideology of the freedom fighters was the one which everyone was looking up to, that India would emerge as a nation where everything would be fine. But in the course of these nearly 25 years, it became more and more clear that these two parties were trying to make the most of a situation in which the maximum number of people were not beneficiaries in any way. And these two parties were one section who were there in the government, most of them, and the other were people who were trying to make the best out of this situation for their own personal gains. So these two sections of society therefore felt that these young men who wanted to bring about a change were very, very dangerous for them. And it is this aspect that Mohashweta Devi introduces into his novel as she makes Sujata undertake her day's journey on Broti's birthday. Mohashweta Devi has brought in these two women characters for exposing multiple parameters, some of which are they represent two other social strata apart from that of Sujata. As I told you in my previous meeting, Chomu's mother belongs to that section which has arrived from Bangladesh after the partition, and therefore they live in a colony in which the standard of life is very low, and as Sujata takes a view of it's like a cinematographic view of Shomu's house, which she has visited after 1 year. She realizes that there are many changes in this dwelling. The house has slanted it to one side. The toktoposh which was there is no longer there. In its place, there is a large plank of wood. So this family has started selling out whatever it had in order to eke out a way of living. The standard of living, therefore, here is falling and falling rapidly. These two ladies, they enable Sujata to discover herself as she rediscovers her own son, Broti. For the novel as a whole, these two ladies provide a complete picture of the condition of women affected by the atrocities perpetrated upon the young men who envisioned ushering in a corruption-free society. Now, the socio-economic milieu to which Shomu's widowed mother belongs, living with her young unmarried daughter, portrays her vulnerability to further perpetrations of terror, which is in stark contrast to Sujata's situation. And Shomu's mother talks about this. She tells Sujata that these young men come and tell us that why is she coming here, and please be careful. So they pose a kind of threat to the unprotected women, particularly when the mother knows that she has a young daughter with her. From her socially secured status, Sujata can afford to make attempts to rediscover Broti and to extend the recollections by paying notable visits to Shomu's mother, who doesn't have much of a choice. Nandini helps Sujata to discover herself and rediscover Broti in a different way. She is Broti's girlfriend and political compatriot. Her excruciating experiences make her life a firebrand that is set off against Sujata's calm reassessment of Broti's relationship as his mother. So, let us quickly take a temporal chronology of the novel. 20 years ago, 2 years added to it, Broti was born. So Broti was born on the 17th of January 1948. The novel is set in 1970. The Naxalite movement began in 1968. Sujata was 31 years old when Broti was born. At that time, Jyoti was 10, so he was born in the pre-independence time. All the three older children were born in the pre-independence time. Jyoti, now 10 when Broti was born in 1938. Nipa was 8, so she must have been born in 1940. And Tuli was 6 years old, so she must have been born in 1942. Sujata joined her service in the bank when Broti was 3 years old, and her husband's chartered accountancy firm had suffered tremendous financial losses, so she was compelled to go and find a job. So when she went to the bank, she was 34 years old. And now Sujata is 53 plus and Diponath is 58 plus, according to her version of the narrative. Sujata found an engagement in the bank very easily, simply because she knew people there and she knew English. She was smart, she was good looking. So her finding an employment in the bank as a banker was not difficult. Later on, when Diponath's financial status improved, her mother-in-law and her husband had asked her to stop going to work at the bank because it was no longer necessary. But by then she had discovered that this financial security, as well as going out of the house, allowed her some sort of a freedom without disturbing the equilibrium at home. So she did not give up her job. So that was one small way in which she had already protested against the desires of her husband and her mother-in-law. Now, about Diponath, the first thing that we get to know is when Broti died, what did he do? Page 10. সত্যি বলতে কি তার ছেলে এমন কলঙ্কিত ভাবে মরেছে এই খবরটা ঢাকবার জন্য জ্যোতির বাবা দড়ি টানাটানি করে বেড়াচ্ছিলেন. It was exactly what kind of a man he was. He was more interested in himself, in his social status, in his progress in the economic setup of society, rather than playing the role of a father. He never was a good father in the first place. He was more interested in his own sexual pursuits and his own financial pursuits. Now, to take a look at Sujata Chatterjee, the protagonist of the novel, with whom we will travel along as she moves from place to place in her attempt to rediscover Broti. The title of the novel is Hazar Churashir Ma. So, mathematically, if we write it down, it becomes 1084's mother. So, in the title, there are two items or elements. One is a number, the other is an identity. So, the novel deals with the relation between the two, how that number re-emerges as a different person, a person whom the mother did not know. And as this re-emergence takes place, it is also pointed out in the course of the narrative that Sujata is the mother of 1084, a number which is full of significance because there are 1083 before him and there are many others after him because the time is 1970 and this movement came to a more or less so-called kind of halt in 1972, though it continued in a different way. So during these years, and Mosheta Devi was writing the novel towards the end of 1973, it got published in 1974. So Sujata is actually in 1970, but in the for the sake of the novel, for the sake of the narrative, as has been done by many authors, she is also there for you, the reader, in the present. And therefore, there is this reference to the mothers of thousands of such men. So 1084 is a very significant number. There are more than 1000 before him, and there are many more thousands after him. So Sujata's quest, is the representative quest of many other mothers of the thousands of these men who had been killed in very brutal ways or who had been imprisoned. And that is also spoken about in the course of the narrative, where the walls of the jails become higher and higher, and there are more and more watchtowers. When a machine like a payloader is actually there inside the prison, and they are so scared that these men may escape, that the prison gates don't open when a van arrives. Rather, the prisoner is lifted by this machine as you lift mud or clay into the precincts of the jail from the outside. So all these are mentioned. These are historical pieces of information which are embedded in the narrative. That is why Mosheta Devi says that for her, every single work that she creates is also, it has a very vibrant, a very living historical element in it. The historical element is not just the background. So then, Sujata for us makes an investigative journey like a journalist on Brothi's birth, stroke, death anniversary, 2 years after his death. That is her physical journey. Next, it is also her psychological journey as she discovers herself. In the course of a single day that the novel unfolds, you have a good view of what is going on in Sujata's mind as she interacts with the different persons around her and with whom she also goes to meet outside her home. Therefore, the novel is divided into 4 chapters, as I told you: Shakal, Dupur, Bikel, Shonde, which conveniently I have interpreted as morning, afternoon, evening, but then again, that twilight is a bit problematic for me. With her, the reader also makes a journey. But for the reader, the journey is multidimensional, since there's the historical element which the reader has to negotiate, something which Sujata, Brothi, and all the rest of the characters in the novel had experienced firsthand. So too the author. But for readers like you, for me it is different because I was born when this, I was already born when this movement had begun. I was a child and I was growing up. So I have personal experiences of this movement. But as far as you are concerned, you are much removed from this movement. You haven't been a part of it in any way whatsoever. So when you read this novel, you also make a historical journey in negotiating those times as you get to know better and better about what was actually happening then. So it's a completely different experience. Mosheta Devi has said in many places, as I told you, that in her writings, history plays a very significant role. So let us get back to the novel and see what happens. When Sujata sees what her husband, Brothi's father, was doing, he was not interested in Brothi's body. He was not interested in its cremation. He was not interested in Sujata's mental condition. He was eager to hush up the entire event. As a result, সেদিন ব্রতির সঙ্গে সঙ্গে সুজাতার চেতনায় ব্রতির বাবারও মৃত্যু ঘটে। ব্রতির বাবার সেদিনের সেই মুহূর্তের ব্যবহার সুজাতার চেতনায় প্রবল উল্কাপাত ঘটায়, বিরাট বিস্ফোরণ, a huge explosion। আদিম পৃথিবীতে যেমন ঘটেছিল কোটি কোটি বছর আগে, যেমন বিস্ফোরণে মহাদেশগুলো ছিটকে ম্যাপের দুপাশে সরে গিয়েছিল, মাঝখানে দুস্তর ব্যবধান ঢেকে ফেলেছিল মহাসমুদ্র। The same happened for Sujata as far as Broti's father is concerned. ব্রতি তো তেমন করে মরেনি। ব্রতির মৃত্যুর আগে অনেক প্রশ্ন, পরে অনেক প্রশ্ন, প্রশ্ন চিহ্ন, and it is these questions to which Sujata is seeking an answer. সরাসরি প্রশ্ন চিহ্নের মিছিল। তারপর সব প্রশ্ন অমীমাংসিত থাকতেই, একটি প্রশ্নেরও উত্তর না মিলতেই হঠাৎ ব্রতি চ্যাটার্জির ফাইল বন্ধ করে দেওয়া, that again has been concocted by Broti's father, because a closed file means it has come to an end. There will be no further narrative or discourse regarding Broti Chatterjee. So I shall read a little more from here. দিব্যনাথ ব্রতিকে সহ্য করতে পারতেন না, বলতেন, মাদার্স চাইল্ড, তুমি ওকেই শিখিয়েছো আমার শত্রু হতে। সুজাতা অবাক হয়ে যেতেন। কেন তিনি ব্রতিকে বলতে যাবেন তোর বাবার শত্রু হ? কেন বলবেন? দিব্যনাথ কি সুজাতার শত্রু? দিব্যনাথ যাতে যাতে বিশ্বাস করেন, সেই সম্ভ্রান্ততায়, সাচ্ছল্যতায়, নিরাপত্তায় তো সুজাতাও বিশ্বাস করেন। বিশ্বাস করেন কি না সুজাতা কখনো সে প্রশ্ন নিজেকে করেননি যখন, তখন নিশ্চয়ই তার কোনো প্রশ্নই ছিল না। এই বাড়ি সচ্ছলতা, নিরাপত্তা, এতে সুজাতাও বিশ্বাস করেন। অতএব দিব্যনাথের অভিযোগ মিথ্যা। যদি দিব্যনাথের অভিযোগ মিথ্যে হয়, তাহলে শুধু এই প্রমাণ হয় যে সুজাতা ব্রতিকে দিব্যনাথের শত্রু হতে বলেননি। এ প্রমাণ হয় না যে ব্রতি ওর বাবাকে শত্রু ভাবে। ব্রতি যে দিব্যনাথকে সহ্য করতে পারে না, সে তো সুজাতাও জানেন, ভালো করেই জানেন। কেন ব্রতি? দিব্যনাথ চ্যাটার্জি একক ব্যক্তি হিসেবে আমার শত্রু নন, তবে উনি যেসব বস্তু ও মূল্যে বিশ্বাস করেন, this is what Broti told his mother, this is the conversation between Broti and his mother when he lived, সেগুলোতেও অন্য বহুজনও বিশ্বাস করে। এই মূল্যবোধ যারা লালন করছে, সেই শ্রেণীটাই আমার শত্রু। উনি সেই শ্রেণীরই একজন। So you see how matured Broti was, and when she is recollecting all this, it is actually one form of Sujata's education and initiation into those beliefs which Broti had. কি বলিস তুই ব্রতি? বুঝি না। বুঝতে চেষ্টা করছো কেন? And then he asks his mother to put on the button of his shirt, and the mother tells the son, ব্রতি, তুই খুব অন্যরকম হয়ে যাচ্ছিস। কিরকম? স্টিকোমিথিক এক্সচেঞ্জ, বদলে যাচ্ছিস। বদলাবো না? কোথায় ঘুরছিস সারাদিন? আড্ডা দি, কাদের সঙ্গে? বন্ধুদের। So he refuses to let his mother know what he is up to. That is very significant. Now, on page 50 again, we have another bit of interesting information. তা বলেননি যখন কলকাতার প্রত্যহের রক্তোৎসবকে উপেক্ষা করে কবি ও লেখক শুধু ওপারের মরণযজ্ঞের কথাই বলেছেন। ওপার মানে তখন বাংলাদেশের স্বাধীনতা যুদ্ধ চলছে, 1971। তখন নিশ্চয়ই তাদের দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি নির্ভুল। সুজাতার দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি নিশ্চয়ই ভুল, নিশ্চয়ই। কবি, লেখক, বুদ্ধিজীবী, শিল্পী, এরা তো সমাজের সম্মানিত সভ্য, স্বীকৃতি পাওয়া মুখপাত্র, দেশের প্রতিভূ। সুজাতাকে, তিনি তো শুধু মা। যাদের হাজার হাজার হৃদয়ে এই প্রশ্ন আজও কুরে কুরে খাচ্ছে, তারা কে? তারা শুধু মা। That is what Mahashweta Devi interpolates into this novel. Then again, we have on page 53, সুজাতা বোঝেন তাঁর লেখাপড়া স্বচ্ছ চিন্তা, চিন্তাকে বদ্ধ বাণীতে প্রকাশ করার ক্ষমতা আছে বলে তিনি যেসব কথা চিন্তা করেন, সমুর মা স্বল্প লেখাপড়া, সামান্য বিদ্যা বুদ্ধি, চিন্তাকে বদ্ধবাণীতে প্রকাশ ক্ষমতায় একান্ত অভাব নিয়ে ঠিক একই কথাই চিন্তা করেন। So where is the difference between mothers when the sons are lost and gone and there is no place for redressal? Now I shall turn to page 55. And on page 55, I will just make passing references. You can read this on your own afterwards. We have information from Shomu's mother about the mothers of the other boys. These 4 boys have been documented. They are the 4. The 5th, Broti, has been hushed up. We have information about Laltu's mother. Laltu's mother was already dead. So Laltu's mother did not have to suffer like the mothers of the other 4 boys. One mother turned mad and she died mad in an asylum. So the different reactions of the mothers to the deaths of their sons is portrayed in the course of the discussion between Shomu's mother and Broti's mother. So then, the mother of Hazar Churashir also becomes the site for the inclusion of the reactions of many other mothers of such young men. But there is one difference between the other mothers and Sujata. The other mothers knew about what their sons were doing. If not exactly, at least they were better informed that the sons were engaged in something which is secret, a secret movement. But Sujata had no idea about what Broti was up to, and therefore she realizes that she had been inadequate as a mother. For as long as Broti lived, she felt that she was doing her duty as a mother perfectly well. But now she realizes that things were much different. It was Broti who was looking after her and not she after him. Then we have on another bit, this is on page 64, where I don't know whether you'll be able to read that copy which I have made out for you. Kintu here we have সমুর মা কেমন করে বুঝবেন সুজাতা কেন কাঁদতে পারেন না, কেমন করে বিশ্বাস করবেন ও বাড়িতে ব্রতির নামই কেউ পারতপক্ষে উচ্চারণ করে না, কেমন করে ভাববেন ব্রতির নাম যাতে কাগজে না ওঠে সেজন্যে ব্রতির বাবা কি আকুল ছোটাছুটি করেছিলেন। Excuse me, this is by way of a question. কেননা সমুর বাবা নিজেকে বাঁচাবার কথা ভাবেননি, ভাবা যায় তাও তিনি জানতেন না। যারা ভাবতে পারে তাদের সঙ্গে সমুর বাবা হেও আসিল দরিদ্র দোকানি, পুঁজি আসিল না। সমুর বাবার কোনো পরিচয় হয়নি কোনো দিন। দিব্যনাত্রা আর সমুর বাবারা এদেশে 2 মেরুতে বাস করেন। This is something else which he had got to know. And then of course there is the reference to Saroj Pal, Thanar Babu. Then on page 66 you have আহ সুজাতা যদি বলেন ব্রতীকে তার মৃত সন্তানকে বোঝাবার জন্যই তিনি এখানে আসেন, সরি বোঝবার জন্য তিনি এখানে আসেন, তাও সমুর মা বুঝবেন না। সুজাতা যদি বলেন ব্রতী যখন বদলে যেতে শুরু করে সে কিছু কিছু বই পড়ে বা বুলি শুনেই বদলে যায়নি। সমুর মতো দরিদ্র বাপমার সন্তান, লালটুর মতো ভাগ্য প্রহৃত অপমানিত যুবক, এদের এবং অন্যান্য মানুষদের জীবনের জ্বালা নিজের রক্তমাংসে অনুভব করেই ব্রতী বদলেছিল। জীবনই তাকে বদলে যেতে বাধ্য করে, তাই সে নিজের নির্দিষ্ট জীবন ত্যাগ করে। সে জীবন থাকলে ব্রতী বিলেত যেত, ফিরত, বিরাট চাকরি করত, সমাজের ওপর তলায় উঠে যেত অতি সহজে, বিনা চেষ্টায়। সে কথাও সমুর মা বুঝবেন না, কেননা সমুর মা এখনই বললেন, আপনার পোলার মুখখানা আমার মনে লড়ে চড়ে দিদি, জাগো কিছু নাই, তারা খ্যাপা খ্যাপ্ত হয়। সমু সুডলা কইতে কইতে কেন, আমরা কি ভিখারি যে যা হকলে পাইবার কথা তাই ভিক্ষা কইরা চাইয়া নিমু আর লাত খামু? কিন্তু ব্রতীর তো হকল আসিল দিদি, হে কেন বা মরতে আইছিল? To this question Sujata also seeks an answer. Why did Broti go and join those persons? That is one big section of society whom Broti was representing. So that is also there. Then page 68, where we have Bikil, we have Nondini, and Sujata tells Nondini. Nondini আবার বলল, আগেও বলেছে কথাটা, এখনো যখন বলল ওর চোখে সামান্য বিস্ময়, ভাসমান মেঘের মতো অস্থায়ী ছায়া ফেলে চলে গেল। যেন ও এখনো সম্পূর্ণ বিশ্বাস করতে পারে না, অথবা ভেবে পায় না এই বিশ্বাসঘাতকতার ফলে সমুরা নিহত হতে পারে জেনেও অনিন্দ কেমন করে এ কাজ করেছিল। So the anger which Nandini now has is not against Anindo, but against herself, against Broti, for having trusted completely where they should have been suspicious. Then, so that element is also there, that one had made the mistake of trusting completely. Broti, on the one hand, was a firebrand revolutionary, on the other hand, was innocent because he had trusted all people, including the wrong people, for which he had to pay a heavy price in one way and Sujata in another way. নন্দিনী আবার বলল, সুজাতা দেখলেন ওর শীর্ণ কালো ক্লান্ত মুখে চোখের নিচে এক স্থায়ী ছায়া। This permanent shadow is Broti to Sujata. Broti will be there in Nandini's eyes shadow, that permanent shadow out there, because Nandini has had a very different kind of experience when she was kept in solitary isolation, when she was exposed to intense light in the interrogation cell for days on end, for hours on end, as a result of which she is near blind. She has been tortured physically and mentally, but she says she has not broken, she has given up. So where Shomu's mother is a broken woman, Nandini is not. She is still upright, she still believes in the cause, and she provides Sujata with a kind of strength and support which makes Sujata go ahead in her own way. মনে হলো নন্দিনীকে কোনোদিনও চেনা যাবে না, জানা যাবে না, সহসা ক্ষতি হয়ে যাচ্ছে মনে হলো, শূন্যতার অনুভূতি। ব্রতী যাকে ভালোবেসেছিল তাকে কোনোদিনও জানবেন না, চিনবেন না, তার মন তার কাছে চির অচেনা হয়ে থাকবে, ভাবতে সুজাতার বড় কষ্ট হলো, ব্যথা। সমুর মার কাছে আর যেতে পারবেন না, নন্দিনীকে কোনোদিন ভালো করে চিনতে পারবেন না, বড় ব্যথা, বড় ক্ষতির শোক। নন্দিনীর কোন বিশ্বাস, কোন অভিজ্ঞতা সুজাতা কোনো বিশ্বাস, কোনো অভিজ্ঞতা সুজাতা ভাগ করে নেননি। বুঝতে বা জানতে চেষ্টা করেননি নন্দিনীদের, ব্রতীদের যা যা নিয়ে ব্যস্ত ছিলেন তার কতটা অপচয়, কতটা সার্থকতা কে তাকে বলে দেবে? সুজাতার স্বভাব ও মনের ঘাটতিগুলোকে সুজাতা এমনি করে চিনবেন? সেই জন্যই কি ব্রতী সেদিন সন্ধ্যায় নীল শার্ট পরে বেরিয়ে গিয়েছিল? সিঁড়ির নিচে দাঁড়িয়ে চোখ তুলে চেয়ে দেখেছিল সুজাতার মুখের দিকে। This image has become permanent in Sujata's memory. And a point to be noted here, I have a feeling that Mahashweta Devi has also put in much of her personal experiences into the making of this novel. Because when she says that what was important to Sujata and what wasn't, she had not been able to discern that. In every interview, Mahashweta Devi says one thing, that she had the ability to decide what was needful and what was needless. The needless she did not bother about, and the needful to her was what she thought was right. So she has no regrets in her life, and she is very happy with what she has been able to do and experience. So the difference between the needful and the needless arrives to Sujata as well over here. Then on page 73, they talk about betrayal. Does it help you any? হ্যাঁ, এখন মনে হয়, তখন কত সহজে মনে হতো সত্যি একটা এরা শেষ হয়ে যাচ্ছে। We are bringing a new age in. আমি আর ব্রতী শুধু কথা বলতে বলতে কতদিন শ্যামবাজার থেকে ভবানীপুর হেঁটে ফিরেছি। And this description of their walking from Shambhajar to Bhavanipur, you know it's a very long distance, and you will imagine that you would have booked an Ola or an Uber, and here these two are walking down that road. Why? Because they are discussing a lot of things, and they are seeing a lot of things. She tells Sujata what they had seen, and in the course all these things get back to Sujata's memory, and these things get coming back to her as if the same film is being rewound and played again and again. So this description is very important. তখন যা দেখতাম, মানুষ, বাড়ি, পথের নিয়ম, ফুটপাতে ফেরিওয়ালার কাছে লাল গোলাপ, পথের ধারে ফেস্টুন, বাস স্টপে সাঁটা খবরের কাগজ, মানুষের মুখে হাসি, পথের দোকানে কোন লিটল ম্যাগাজিনে কোন কবিতার সুন্দর ইমেজ, যখন ময়দানে মিটিংয়ে জনতার হাততালি, হিন্দি গানের সুন্দর সুর শুনতাম, আমাদের কি তীব্র আনন্দ হতো, আনন্দ ধরে রাখা যেত না। We felt explosive, felt loyal to all and everything. সে মন আর ফিরে আসবে না, আর ফিরে পাবো না আমি, because the whole scenario has changed for Nandini. কোনো দিন ফিরে পাবো না। টোটাল লস, একটা এরা সত্যি শেষ হয়ে গেছে, সেদিনের আমি মরে গেছি। কেন নন্দিনী? আজ সুজাতা। ব্রতী নেই বলে? ব্রতী নেই বলে, নন্দিনী অ্যাফার্মস। আরো অনেক কিছু নেই। সলিটারি সেলে থাকতে ভেবে ভেবে আমিও শেষ হয়ে গেছি। ওরকম করে বলো না, মাও আপনার মতো করে কথা বলে। So this is Nandini's mother. মা বোঝে না, আপনি বুঝবেন না, you will not understand us. একেবারে বুঝবো না নন্দিনী? কেমন করে বুঝবেন? আপনারা কি আমাদের মতো করে নিজের লয়্যালটি প্লেজ করেছিলেন to everything, of everyday life? Now the authorial comments, না, সুজাতা করেননি। আনুগত্য গচ্ছিত রাখেননি পথচারীর হাসিতে ভেসে আসা গানের টুকরোয়, লাল গোলাপে, উজ্জ্বল আলোয়, ঝুলন্ত ফেস্টুনের কাপড়ে। সুজাতা কোথায়, কোন কোন জিনিসে আনুগত্য গচ্ছিত রেখেছিলেন? So Sujata is being made to see herself in so many different ways. Then let us come to the next slide. This is page 75. সুজাতা হঠাৎ যা করেন না তাই করলেন। আবেগের বশে কাজ করা ওর স্বভাবে নেই। জীবনেও যা স্বাভাবিক ইচ্ছে, যাতে আগ্রহ, তা করতে সাহস পাননি। অল্প বয়সে দিব্যনাথ তাকে ঝড় দেখতে জানলায় দাঁড়ালেও শাসন করতেন। অল্প বয়সে স্বভাবে যে যে অনুশাসন ঢুকিয়ে দেওয়া হয় আর সেগুলো অতিক্রম করা যায় না। তবু সুজাতা নন্দিনীর হাতে হাত রাখলেন। মনে মনে এই মুহূর্ততেই কি সুজাতা জানছেন না এই সময়, এই সুযোগ আর ফিরে পাবেন না তিনি? সময়ের মতো পলাতক আর কে? রতির নীল শার্ট পরে সিঁড়ির নিচে দাঁড়িয়ে তার দিকে চেয়ে থাকার অমূল্য দুর্লভ সময় আর ফিরে পাবেন না। এখন মনের নিচে অতলে কি শূন্যতা, কিসের যেন অপরিমেয় শোক। নন্দিনীকে আর কাছে পাবেন না। তাই সুজাতা নন্দিনীর হাতে হাত রাখলেন। And this keeping her hand on Nandini's hand was like an elixir touch which gives her the strength of mind to try to find herself anew and bring herself out in a different way, which gets expressed in her interaction with her husband when she gets home. Here we have, ব্রতিকে তুমি খুব ভালোবাসতে? সুজাতা is asking নন্দিনী. তখন তাই মনে হতো, says নন্দিনী। এখনো তাই মনে হয়। শুনেছি সময়ে সবাই ভুলে যায়, কিংবা ওর মুখ আবছা হয়ে যাবে মনে, ভাবলেও ভয় করে। হ্যাঁ, আপনারও? হ্যাঁ, জানি না ভুলে যাব কিনা, জানি না কম মনে পড়বে কিনা, কিন্তু শুধু ব্রতি নয়, যখন ভাবি so many died for what? জানেন জেল থেকে বেরিয়ে সবচেয়ে আগে কি বুকে লেগেছিল? কি? যখন দেখলাম সব কিছু নর্মাল, চমৎকার, যেন যা হবার হয়েছে, এখন সব শান্ত হয়ে গেছে, এই ভাবনা চতুর্দিকে। তখন বুক ভেঙে গিয়েছিল। কিন্তু এখন তো সব শান্ত হয়ে গেছে নন্দিনী। না! নন্দিনী চেঁচিয়ে উঠল। সুজাতা আবার বিমূঢ়। শান্ত হয়নি, হতে পারে না। তখনও কিছুই কোয়েট ছিল না, এখনো নেই। ডোন্ট সে সব শান্ত হয়ে গেছে। আফটার অল ইউ আর ব্রতি's মাদার। সব শান্ত হয়ে গেছে একথা আপনার বলা বা বিশ্বাস করা উচিত নয়। কোত্থেকে এই কমপ্লেসেন্সি আসে? কিছুই শান্ত হয়নি? না, হয়নি। Why did they die? কি শেষ হয়েছে? মানুষ সুখে আছে? রাজনীতির খেলা শেষ হয়েছে? It is a better world? না। হাজার হাজার ছেলে বিনা বিচারে আটক, তবুও বলবেন সব শান্ত হয়ে গেছে? নন্দিনী মাথা নাড়ল বারবার, বলল, সবাই আমাকে তাই বোঝায়। মা বলে, তুই তো আর কিছু করবি না, তবে কেন বিয়ে করবি না, সংসার করবি না? তুমি কি মেডিকেল গ্রাউন্ডে? দ্যাট ইজ ওয়াই শি ইজ আউট, and her mother has arranged for her getting married to a young man called সন্দীপ। সন্দীপ কে? একটি ছেলে, ভালো চাকুরে। এখন বোধহয় আমাদের মতো বিয়ে করে ধীমান রায়ের কবিতা লেখার মতো আরেকটা ফ্যাশন। নইলে সে আমায় বিয়ে করবে কেন? আমি কারণ খুঁজে পাই না। So Dhiman Rai is mentioned here, the Dhiman Rai whom she will meet in the party. And then in the evening when she returns home, Dibbanath comes and tries to assert himself like he always does. দিব্যনাথ ঢুকলেন to her room, প্রৌঢ় ভোগী ও মাংসল চেহারা। এই প্রথম সুজাতার মনে হলো অত ঘাড় চেঁচে চুল ছাটা মুখে স্নো মাখা কুৎসিত। মনে হলো দিব্যনাথের চিকনের পাঞ্জাবি আর পাড় দেওয়া শাল না পরলেও পারেন। পায়ের জুতো এই দিনের জন্য কেনা। দিব্যনাথ সবচেয়ে দামি গেঞ্জিও পরেছেন, সুজাতা জানেন। কি ভেবেছ তুমি? জানো অন্তত 50 জন লোক আসছে। জানি। মানে? ব্যবস্থা করাই ছিল। নিপা এসেছে, তুমি বাড়িতেই ছিলে। ব্যবস্থা হয়েই গেছে যখন, তখন আর কথা বাড়িও না। কথা বাড়িও না? তুমি ভেবেছ কি? This is the first time that Sujata asserts herself. তুমি স্পেস, এই মুহূর্তে স্পেস, এখান থেকে স্পেস, বেরিয়ে না গেলে স্পেস, আমি স্পেস, আবার স্পেস, বাড়ি থেকে স্পেস, বেরিয়ে যাব স্পেস, আর ফিরবো না। সুজাতা থেমে থেমে বললেন। দিব্যনাথ যেন গালে চড় খেলেন। 34 বছরের বিবাহিত জীবনে সুজাতা একবারও এভাবে স্বামীর সঙ্গে কথা বলেননি। চেঞ্জ। তুমি সারাদিন কোথায় ছিলে তা জিজ্ঞেস করতে পারবো না? না। হোয়াট? 2 বছর আগে 32 বছর ধরে তুমি কোথায় সন্ধে কাটাতে? কাকে নিয়ে গত 10 বছর ট্যুরে যেতে? কেন তুমি তোমার এক্স টাইপিস্টের বাড়ি ভাড়া দিতে? তা আমি কোনো দিন জিজ্ঞেস করিনি। তুমি আমার একটি কথাও জিজ্ঞেস করবে না, কোনো দিন না। গড, যখন বয়স কম ছিল তখন বুঝতাম না। পরে তোমার মা তোমার প্রত্যেকটি পাপ, হ্যাঁ পাপ, ঢেকে চলতেন বলে কোনো দিন জিজ্ঞেস করতে প্রবৃত্তি হয়নি। তারপর আই হ্যাড নো ইন্টারেস্ট টু নো। তবে তুমি যেভাবে বাড়ি থেকে তোমার পরিবারের কাছ থেকে চুরি করে সময় কাটাতে, আমি তা করি না। আরো শুনতে চাও? তুমি আজ, হ্যাঁ, why not, আজ নয় কেন? যাও। যাবো? হ্যাঁ, যাও। যাও কথাটা সুজাতা আদেশের মতো করে বললেন। দিব্যনাথ বেরিয়ে গেলেন ঘাড় মুছতে মুছতে। The re-emergence of Sujata as a result of her day's journey and her day's rediscovery of Broti. Then again, on we have on page 92 a discussion of how Tuli, this is where Tuli's element is there, about which I told you earlier, how she used to encourage and camouflage her father's extramarital affairs. Then we come to page 91. Dibbanath says, Dibbanath খুব খুশি হয়েছেন। টনি তারই মতো মাতৃভক্ত। মায়ের প্রতি কথায় টনি হ্যাঁ বলে। সেই জন্যই on Broti's death anniversary, the engagement ceremony had been organized, because Tony's mother's Guruji, who lives in America, had found that this was an auspicious day for the engagement to take place. So Tony's matribhakti and Dibbanath's matribhakti seem to find a kind of parallel over here. Then on page 98, she finds there is one interesting thing, that the two daughters and the daughter-in-law are dressed in the same way, the same sari, the same stole, the same hairstyle, as if they intend to point towards one common factor, that they subscribed to the same stereotypical lifestyle of the women who belong to this section of society. Then on page 118, we have Sujata going out to meet the guest. Sujata takalen, Saroj Pal takalo. Who is Sujata? Hazar Churashir Ma. This is from where the novel gets its title. Who has made Broti Hazar Churashir? The system which is corrupt and which is cruel. Broti Chatterjee মা। একে দেখতে হবেই বলেই তো আসতে চায়নি। বিনি এগিয়ে এলো। নামেন না? না। একবারও না? Because Saroj Pal is Tony Kapadia's friend. Bini is being very friendly and familiar with him. না, কাজ আছে। টনি আর তুলিকে উইশ জানাবেন। খাবারের বাক্স নিন অন্তত, দিন, তাড়া আছে। আচ্ছা, নমস্কার। স্টার্ট, গাড়ি গর্জালো, বেরিয়ে গেল। It is as if Saroj Pal is very eager to get out of the sight of the mother of 1084. There is a guilty conscience, and possibly because of this sense of guilt that they are more aggressive and they are more dangerous. So then, the novel ends in this way. এ কান্নায় রক্তের গন্ধ, প্রতিবাদ, সুখী শোক, তারপর সব অন্ধকার। সুজাতার শরীরটা আছড়ে পড়ল। What happens to her? It is anybody's guess. দিব্যনাথ চেঁচিয়ে উঠলেন, তবে অ্যাপেন্ডিক্স ফেটে গেছে? The question is, Dibbanath thinks that the appendix has burst, which implies that Sujata is dead. Is Sujata dead? Or has she become unconscious to wake up again to consciousness and to emerge as a differently conscious woman? That is something which Mahashweta Devi indicates. But if you go by her interviews, then you know that Sujata is not dead. The story of Sujata, if she is dead, will come to a dead end. But that is not what will happen. So the purpose behind this reading of the text is to introduce you to some of the sites in the novel which expose or express the gender-related issues. The entire novel is based on the Ma of 1084, and the recurrent notion is that 1084 is a number in a long list of thousands of such bodies, each of which has a unique past of its own. But the one common feature of the life and activity of these bodies was that they were intelligent, brave, and not self-seeking. They wanted to see the nation as what was promised during the freedom movement, a nation in which everyone would get his or her share of welfare, where there would be no corruption, no self-aggrandizement. When they attempted to realize this vision, they became a threat to multiple parties for obvious reasons. At this time, Mahashweta Devi was writing about the rural deprived sections of eastern India, particularly Bengal, Bihar, and Jharkhand. So when asked why she wrote Hazar Churashir Ma, in an interview, she said that one day a group of young men arrived at her Baliganj residence in Kolkata and asked her why she did not write about them and their movement. Those who were engaged in this movement and who were being brutally killed by the police and by other groups whose corrupt interests they were protesting against. So she says that she gave them her word that she would redress their grievance. This was around 1973, and Hazar Churashir Ma was the result. Thus, the strong political element in the novel. Thus, the narrative which builds around Sujata's quest for understanding, Broti, number 1, number 2, herself, number 3, Broti and herself together. In the course of one day, 17 January 1970, reference the first line of the novel. In this understanding, she is assisted by Somu's mother and Nandini, who lead her to understanding Broti as, number 1, a young man who had taken upon himself a responsibility about which she knew nothing for as long as he lived, yet she was his mother. Number 2, her son, whom she loved and cared for, but whom she knew so little. Number 3, the son who was so very sensitive and concerned about her status in the family. Number 4, a man with a difference which the rest of her family was striving to suppress, because they were what he was not. They were what he detested and wanted to demolish. Thus, Broti becomes her teacher after he dies. Her search for herself begins from here in a new direction of confidence and refusal to surrender, to protest instead. The novel indicates Sujata's discarding her upbringing to surrender and accept. She questions, protests, and asserts herself. Thank you. Now you may unmute your gadgets and pass comments. That would be wonderful. Because questions there are like those Proshner Michil, to which I myself may not have answers. So, any comment, please?
Ma'am, we see that Shujata regrets that couldn't understand Bruti properly. So could this
Ikshita,
be
Nandini, Ronita, Sindura, Shoham have unmuted. Any question?
Yes, ma'am, I
Right
have a
then,
question.
if you don't have any more questions, then I shall end here our discussion of Hazar Churashir Ma. And if you have further questions, then of course I'm always available in the WhatsApp group, or you can even ring me up or send me personal messages, to which I shall try to give answers. If you have comments, it would be wonderful. If you wish to write something on Mosheta Devi, it will be the best tribute to a great author who has been translated into many, many languages, who never cared for any award, accepting the money. She always said, yes, the money is important because the money will go to the Shabot Shamiti. So whatever she got, she always gave to Postim Bangok Area Shabot Kollan Shamiti, which is still working even today under this condition of lockdown for the Shabots, nearly 2,500 Shabot families in Purulia and Bankura. So Marsheta Devi's good work is going on in the social sphere, and in the academia. It would be good if we could also respond to her. With that, I end my discussion.